All right, welcome back, folks. Keeping the streak alive. It's day 9. Per usual, konnichiwa, MAKU desu, irashaimase. So yesterday was our one of 2 super days, and went pretty hard. Tried as much as I can to cover pretty much most of the hiragana. So instead of trying to recall identically, there were way too many elements. So we'll just take a look at these and review. We learned our modifiers from all the the kakiku ke kakiku ke ko. Now we have gakigu gakigu ge go, and then the sashisu se so. Now we have zazi zu ze zo, and then the tachi chu pe to, and then we have the da, and then ji. We're just gonna use the standard dialect, so it's just ji zu de do, and then very near, way at the end, was I think they were the ha, right? Ha, he, hu, he, ho, which is ba, bi, bu, be, bo. Didn't get these yet. It would round up the P sounds, but let's see. This one looks like it uses a little circle thing, so we'll get to that in a bit. So pa, pi, pu, pe, po. We're just off the same kanas of the B's, and these ones I'll just figure out, I guess, because these ones, it's adding the ya, the you, and the yo, so I will be able to figure that out since these use the same hiragana. So that's fine. And then we know the extended consonants. I've seen it somewhere, not in our lessons yet. And then the extended vowels. So instead of using the katakana, where they put like the dash, right, the one stroke, these ones just repeat. So these are still the same kana. I just need to be aware of associating the little circle thing. Sorry I didn't come yesterday. I'm Jojo Siwa. By the way, I only followed you on that account and not my phone. Oh, hey, welcome. Thanks. I think I remember. Yeah, welcome, Jojo. How are you today? We're just reviewing today, another super day. My voice is kind of hopefully it holds up. I went pretty hard yesterday. Today is day 2. Today is the day we remove romaji and practice our hiragana without romaji. The lesson stuff is gonna be rough because a lot of the current unit uses katakana, right? Razu, dasu? No, is that like, and then it's like America, Canada, they're all probably, I'm just gonna have to do the same thing in the beginning as Unit 1 and Unit 2. So this is the natural part where I would remove romaji. If I was doing Duolingo for Japanese people, I would probably encourage about here when you accomplish your hirakana. Up here, if you just remove your romaji right away, you're still doing the same thing you're doing here, which is associating the kana, the hirakana, with the katakana. So you're doing the same bridging step. You're memorizing the shape until you find out the kana for it. Ah, yes, Jojo, indeed. All right, so this will be the natural point. Tomorrow when I get back to normal stuff, there is a chance I'll bring back the romaji just so I can see what katakana romaji looks like, because I want to at least be able to keep up with attaching. I want to go from the kana to the romaji now. So right now, back in when I started, I wanted to go to romaji to the kana. Now this kana, the hiragana, is gonna be bridged to katakana, and then I'm gonna use katakana to go all the way back to the beginning to romaji. I want to at least familiarize the romaji so I can use both forms of keyboard inputs and help people either make a gigantic leap or vice versa. It's always nice to go back and forth, backwards and forward, so you can remember where you started, all the different steps of the learning, and then going backwards. It's kind of like I talked about this before, and coincidentally a friend of mine posted something that reminded me of why I do this. A lot of times if you don't know where your foundations are, it's hard to go forward. I mean, where the foundations are, if you keep going forward, you never find out how to go backwards. So what I mean by that is, say you do a task and you use a tool, and you use that tool a lot. That means you no longer practice anything that tool replaces, right? Just the same as when you learn something and you constantly use the same thing at the highest level, you no longer use tools at the basic level. So for me, I always practice foundations. And for a lot of people, romaji is not the foundation of their Japanese. Romaji is the foundation of English. So I like to practice all these foundations so that they can be useful in the future for teaching purposes and for educating purposes. So it bridges the gap. So if I become a very great Japanese speaker and I keep using Japanese at the level that I will eventually be 6 months down the road, it will be very difficult to communicate with someone who's starting Japanese. So I don't want to be that. I don't strive to be the best at the specific task. I want to be someone that enables and bridges the gap. It's also the same with communication and problem solving. Problem solving is generally held at a nondescript level. If you constantly solve problems, very specific problems, you get very good at solving those specific problems. However, if you don't practice the foundation of problem solving, you do not know how to branch from you kind of become unpracticed. Not like you don't know how to do it. You'll have to recondition yourself and practice again. So this will be, I think this will be a great place to do our digression for today before we start our lesson. So it's a good inspiration. The person that posted the thing about the teaching, about seeing their students. So let's go into that for a moment. Before we do lessons, I generally start with reflecting on certain things. So We'll call this digression about foundational work. So when we're younger, right? As we're growing up, we young lad being really happy, we take in generally whatever we take in is foundational work. Hopefully, it's foundational work. Nowadays, though, there has been a concern. Well, I've heard people giving up on Japanese due to kanji, but giving up for katakana is something I've never heard before. Are you sure? Because if you, again, so Babin, I'm gonna assume that you're, let's say, N2 plus, right? I'm gonna assume now you're about M2 plus. So here's the thing about framework. When one becomes more competent, I'm jumping the gun here, but let me just jump the gun for a moment. When one becomes competent, they tend to project competence. So when you're really smart or knowledgeable, you tend to project being knowledgeable and smart. What happens is that it increases the likelihood that your environment will be self-selected for competence. Oh, you barely N3? That's still fine. N3 is still way past hiragana and katakana. So keep it going, right? That's great. N3 is excellent. Sorry, I was just guessing, right? I was just guessing. Hey, you never know. You might be closer to N2 than you think, right, Babin? Keep up the. What I'm saying is, this is not N5 or below, right? You're not starting out anymore. So when you become very competent, and this happens quite a bit, I'll share a story from my life where it can be very eye-opening, at least for myself. So when you become competent, you project competence, as your language improves, your communication improves, you start to sound very improved, like, you know, the way you communicate yourself, because communication is a life skill. So you don't necessarily, and even if it's a different language, so your understanding of another language may inherently improve the language you prefer, or when you use that language, in either case, your competence is going to be projected, because those words are necessary every single time. So when you project competence, your environment is going to attract competence. So over time, it may seem like ain't no way people struggle well below my competence. And how this is, we'll skip this for now. So when you become competent, it goes up. The gap grows from incompetence. So we'll just say the unknowledgeable. That's a made-up word, but that's what. Right? So your environment is going to be pre-selected for your level of understanding. As long as you're a person, this is for people who focuses a lot on self-improvement, self-esteem, even actually successful, like mentally, like personally being satisfied and successful. Bonjour. Being successful. So when you become successful, very competent, you project that, and then and what you do is also you pre-select your lifestyle and environment to better cater to your level of understanding. So over time, your environment's level of competence goes up. What this generally does is it creates confirmation bias. And if you're someone who's very ambitious, aspiring, and you're constantly trying to get better, there's another thing that pushes back on you, and that's if you're a humble person, someone who always feels like they need to get better, you get imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome and also being at the I generally draw this normal distribution graph, but this is what's often happens, the Dunning or the Kruger-Dunning effect. That's always at play here, right? So what this means is as your level goes up, right? As your competence grows up, where you started gets farther and farther away. When you're up here and you're constantly showing that, like providing advice, talking at that high level, the people around you the ones that stay with you will be the ones that resonate with you. The gap is not so big that they feel uncomfortable hanging around you, right? So around you, the people naturally increases in competence. That's kind of like going from elementary school, middle school, high school, college, then university. In that scape, you're always surrounded by people who are equally, if not a little less or above you within your range. And that makes you feel very normal. It makes you feel normalized, as though I'm not that competent, I'm not that special, right? Once you step out of that environment, and that's usually when someone needs to teach through a competence gap, so through a gap. So say you're a college level professor who needs to teach an elementary school teacher. The gap is gigantic, and it takes quite some time to normalize that again, where you have to understand that the imposter syndrome makes you feel normal, as in as you keep going up, you don't feel very special. Like over time, if you constantly exude your competence level, everyone around you grows with you. They are also all improving over time, and you like to be around people who speak at your level and communicate and interact at your level. So over time, it might seem like, yeah, nah, I'm not that special. I'm barely N3, Babin, barely N3. But you have to remember that you've done a lot to get to N3. People start at less than N5, right? And then we have to understand about distribution curves when you understand that. So your N3 is still probably in the minority up here, like at the other end when it comes to the Japanese. In this context, the vast majority of people are over here. They're up here, which is around N4 or less, actually, when they first start. Like online, when you see people pick up, there's probably a larger population that you're not exposed to anymore because you don't have to. You're now getting now you're over N3. So what happens is it keeps getting smaller. Your population that you're going to resonate with, and we're not talking about the Japanese population. We're talking about someone who is learning Japanese, having other languages. So most people are over on the other side. So if you look at the area, I usually draw a graph on a open surface. So you might be here, right? This barely N3, maybe N1s and plus are here. Now N1s and plus are like this. This is the group. This is how many people, right? This. Now if you, everything over here are the number of people that may stop Japanese. Now when we talk about stopping at hiragana and katakana, where is that? I would say it's probably here and back. So this big chunk right here is still greater than your little here, right? Or anyone above it, because that means anyone over here haven't stopped Japanese before hiragana and katakana or something like that, or it's kind of like here. So we have to understand that there are still a giant population, right? A giant population, if not more. I don't actually know the numbers, so this is not drawn to proportions. I don't actually know the truth. The idea is there are a significant visible but invisible people, because if you're spending a life where you focus, and this is the great thing about successful people and motivated people, is that they look forward, they look up, they don't look back down. Like, you don't look in the past. There's no like application for that yet. You are not motivated to look at the stuff you don't need anymore because you've learned them and you've stepped upon them. So when you're trying to always get better, you look to people who are better than you. You look to things that may make you better. So you rarely look back and see all those people. Well, a teacher's job is literally that, or figuratively. The word would be figuratively and literally, because when they look back they see kids. So oftentimes a teacher's job is to constantly look below their competence level, and they are to raise the competence level of anyone they talk to. So their environment is constantly seeing people who are below their competence level as opposed to being above their competence level. So when you're in like a skill set, right? When you're talking about any skill set, people want to get better. When it comes to that literal skill set, teachers want to get better at teaching. And the paradox here is, to get better at teaching, they spend time looking at skill sets at a lower competence. Without this ability to look at lower competence, you cannot help someone who has a lower competence. So it creates that thing. I got into I don't know what the argument is, but someone was really upset yesterday. And someone's upset because this person, I was going to use this example to analyze things, but this person has a high level of competence. So naturally, when this person gave advice to me, right? When they talked to me in a condescending way. They trivialized my accomplishments. Personally, I wasn't offended because I obviously know where my competence level is, but like, oh dude, man, you only did this for 8 days. Big whoop. That would imply that this person's competence is way above 8 days worth of Japanese, right? But it also implies that they failed at teaching because they don't need to teach anyone. But the thing about these type of stream is people come online and they are very kind people. So this person is incredibly kind, right? They're very kind because they can't help but help people. The problem here is that, can they relate properly anymore? So here's the problem of the internet. That's removed all the time. So when a content creator, to their own right, are really, really successful, when a content creator is really, really successful, they have skills. They have awesome skills. Do they spend time teaching though? They don't. So teaching is enabling. When a content creator is really skilled, they offer advice. That's different from the field of teaching. Teaching is process oriented. This requires a very long time. It requires some hand holding. It requires some pushing. When you offer advice, it cuts the process. It gives you the end result. For example, what's the difference between advice and teaching? So, I like to tell people that romaji is your starting point. Start with romaji, take one letter and associate it with a kana, and then try to take that kana and reassociate it with the romaji. I would probably start with a flashcard with the kana on one side and the romaji on the back and see if that helps at all. If it doesn't help, we can start from there and access a different type of things. Like, what do you do every day? Do you look at shapes or do you look at syntax, like a character syntax? What do you remember best? This is getting to know how that person learns, and then you step through the process and resolve the problem with them. When you're offering advice, it's a projection. It's a projection of your own experiences. This is what I did, and it worked for me. It probably worked for you. I decided to remove romaji from day one, suffered through the torture, and I got there faster. You should try that too. That's advice. There's no process. The process is to figure out how that other person learns. The difference here is you have to end up learning with that person. So when you're a teacher, you have to learn how that person learns. And what you end up doing is acquiring a new way of learning. So the more people, how to measure a teacher's skill. How to measure a teacher's skill. You teach a lot of people, and you acquire a lot of ways to learn. So that one day, you hope that most of the kids that come to you, you can use this toolbox of learning techniques. So if someone struggles with romaji, my advice is not limited to someone who doesn't struggle with romaji. And then when you give an advice, if the person struggles with kana and not romaji, it doesn't ignore that romaji could be useful for that person's kana. Things like that. And you don't need these tools. If you're not educating, if you're not going into education, you don't need these tools. These tools, what these tools will do is you spend more time at lower competence levels. So like, if a Japanese teacher could be a Japanese teacher who starts at elementary school, like teaching elementary school. And you're like, too incompetent. Let's go to middle school. Like, now I'm not feeling it. My competence level is higher than middle school. I'm gonna move to high school to teach, then move to college to teach. That can very much work. What that does is it keeps the level of competence going up simultaneously while investing time in learning how to teach. And that's where my personal life story comes in. I thought that's what was very rewarding about learning how to teach. As I grow up, right? So as early as high school, I tutored, or I helped other people because I'm slightly above them, right? Like anyone who's like 1 year below me, I didn't have any problems teaching them because the gap in competence is similar. This is where the internet comes in. When you're watching someone play a video game, you're automatically assuming that that person has similar competence level. So that's why it feels appropriate to provide unsolicited advice, because it's assuming advice is useful when this gap in competence is small enough so that the two people can resonate. They're like, oh yeah, man, this boss is so hard. It's so hard, but at first you just have to do this and this, pay attention to that, and that person gets the advice because the gap is small enough. When you're teaching, this gap can get gigantic, and it's even more pronounced when someone is learning from scratch and then you want to help them. You want to offer advice, right? As a person who loves Japanese. Now, the problem is here could rise is, how competent are you? Have you asked yourself, how smart are you? How hard have you worked? Because the harder you have worked, it means the more experience you have. And that makes your competence gap larger between the two. And it can be very, very difficult for someone who is getting the advice to understand the advice. And as a Japanese teacher, you could have a Japanese teacher who decided, I'm not going to learn all of the kanji. I'm not going to spend all my time improving the kanji. I have to take some of that time away so that I can focus on all the stuff that my kids are struggling with. So it takes time away to focus on teaching. This is why there's this stereotype about coaches and teachers. And it's a really deep one, and it hurts it really hurt, like my heart gets broken every time people say this about it. These are people that didn't make it. This is something that happens very often, as in like coaches aren't as good at the skill set. Teachers are the same, right? Like, oh yeah, but if you hate your coach or something, it's like, yeah, my coach, he can't even do what I can do. I should be able to. Well, the idea is they can't. Like, but their skill set isn't just the skill. Their skill set is literally in their name. They have to spend time learning how to coach. They have to spend time learning how to teach. And that's time not spending developing the same skill that you're working on. So it's not everyone. Obviously, I'm not talking about everyone. It just breaks my heart when I hear that. I love it when students, right? This is like let's just throw in some Star Wars here. the most satisfying and rewarding parts of being a coach and a teacher is when your student surpasses you in the skill set. Okay? The downside of this happening, the trade-off of this happening, is you will know that you helped the student, but the student didn't practice teaching or coaching. Your hope is that you inspired them to remember or gain self-awareness of what you did as a coach or teacher for them. And one day, that when they no longer practice their skill, the skill that they've capped, they will think back fondly on the people that coached and taught them and explore teaching and coaching so that they can pass on their skills to the next generation. Usually nowadays, this part doesn't happen anymore because the skill caps are so high on our skills now. Like, the internet has proved that. The internet is there. YouTube, Twitch is constantly reminding you that the skill cap is so gigantic, because when you look at YouTube and Twitch, you are reminded of what is the pinnacle, what is the zenith of your competence, of the skill set you have. So it hasn't happened yet because the internet generation is still less than 30 years old. Like, I was pre-internet generation, right? So this awareness of where that skill cap is wasn't there when I was like growing up. I didn't look at the highest peak. I looked at what's slightly above me all the time, right? So for me, I have no desire to try to reach the skill cap. And what happens is, if you're constantly looking up, I would say those people who are going to become 30 all the way, they probably have a lifetime's worth of practicing the skill cap. So no, I don't think people are great at teaching or coaching, because I know they're awesome at doing what they do, which is not teaching or coaching, is to keep getting better. Because the skill cap is so high, you can probably spend your entire lifetime doing it and you'll be okay. Like, you're envision. The downside is, which is where the article came in, is a friend of mine that I known for a while gave me an article, and they're talking about the state of teaching. The punchline here was the state of teaching. They noticed that there were deficiencies. One of the symptoms of the state of this teaching is that there was deficiencies in kids, and not that kids can't do specialized tasks, but they lost foundational skills, and these foundational skills are being augmented or being helped by tools. And these tools are really good. They are really good. Like, I can't emphasize how good they are. They are incredibly good. We're talking about like Google, smartphones. Like, they're excellent. And the better they are, the less you have to do. Right? Because a tool is fantastic. What it does is it removes the need for foundational work. You don't need to learn foundational work because they're so good at replacing it. And right now, teachers, which breaks my heart all the time, because this is not a like a new pandemic. It's been spreading for a while now, and it's been increasing, and I've always been curious how we're going to, as a society of human beings, like everyone around the world, how we're going to address this. Is the idea that our tools keep getting better, which is awesome because it saves us a lot of time, but our competence is getting lower in life skills. Our life skill competence is getting lower, and I see it myself, like in myself. Even at 30 plus, I still feel like my life skills are suffering, right? As in, like, communication, it's my focus, and I still see weaknesses in my communication, even though I spend most of my time focusing on communication. It's still weakening because the tools keep getting better. They just keep getting better. Like, do I call my doctor to make an appointment? Yes and no sometimes. I could rely on a tool to just do it, right? How does that tool work? Well, I have to remember that when I go online and I use an electronic interface, right, to schedule, what I really did was I went to the office, talked to a person, and agreed on a time. That's what really happened. But no, it stops here. It just stops here. Electronic scheduling. You know, go online, tick off a box, good to go. What does that do? Well, it removes one-on-ones in person. It removes negotiation, even though it might not sound like a negotiation. Agreements, right? How to agree on things, how to compromise. These are part of the elements of negotiation. Physically moving there, time management, the list goes on. And I do that. That's what the tool removed from me. So the tool is awesome, absolutely awesome, but we don't practice these skills anymore. Like, and some things I hope the tools will offset that everyone has access to. So everyone, this is assuming this will be okay. This tool will be okay if everyone has access to it. Then that means the human race becomes dependent, fully dependent on doing these things through this tool. That's fair. That can happen. Has it happened now? No. And let's go back to Japanese on how to do that. What are the tools to learn Japanese? What are the tools to learn Japanese? Well, this is where Duolingo comes in. Duolingo is something that someone could use to learn Japanese. To what level? Don't really know. So now you have to analyze. So my goal here when I'm using Duolingo is, what is Duolingo doing for me? What is it doing for me? Well, it's doing a lot of lesson planning. It's guiding my direction in vocabulary. It's providing a very specific collection of voices. And you can extend from that, like ethnicity, accents, because remember, those are people. Well, there is a chance, and we're not going to go into this, but tools are advancing still, because now you could have AI generated content. So you don't know if the voice sample you're hearing is not just generative AI now. It's very faithful. So Even till then, you're saying, well, is it providing an ethnicity or accents? So these things are being replaced right now. Without realizing this, right? This is where the article comes in. Teaching has become almost unimaginably difficult because competence in foundational life skills in kids. So when the kids finally arrive at the grade they are, the teaching grade of this teacher, they notice over the years, like say a teacher that worked for 20 years, they notice that progressively over the years, there's a decline in foundational life skills. And those foundational life skills, even not just life skills, but I'm focused on life skills, but a lot of times it's like knowledge. There are a lot of knowledge checks. Things like adding numbers, how to negate negatives, how double positive still is a positive. Those things, yes, that's pretty typical. But my main interest is life skills. So these things are like doing research. Like, for example, that was listed specifically. How to do research, okay? And I can tell you now, if you're talking to anyone who is younger than 20 years old, research means something very different. It is not the same anymore. Now the question is, what are the pros and cons? Pros and cons of this new age research, right? Well, it's search engine related, obviously. And yes, both older people and younger groups use a search engine. But how do they use it? How do they use it? And that was the topic of this research. You can search terms, right? But the process of understanding the logic behind how to use a search engine based on terms to look for your solution is lost. So, for example, if I ask someone who's less than 20 years old, hey, can you help me search for something? Like, I really want to know how to find the colligative property of water. Immediately, the likelihood is the first search term will be water. Then they might add properties. What they're gonna go do is they're gonna hope that the search engine is gonna find something before it hits something they don't understand, which is colligative. What does that kind of look like? That kind of looks like someone who is using Romaji to learn kana and ultimately increase their bank of kanji. It's the path of least resistance. This pattern isn't just restricted to learning language. It's restricted to learning life skills. The downside is when you're doing this step with tools, it doesn't connect the things. How is Romaji connected to kana, and how is kana connected to kanji? And then reverse in the other direction. So if I gave someone colligative, right, the word colligative properties of water, if they start at colligative, they can't get back to what is the question even asking. Like, what am I even looking for? So when I say, hey, can someone give me a list of the colligative property of water? You're no longer exercising a life skill where you're asking yourself the process of the question. Like the person asking the question, what are they looking for? Why do you not ask back like, hey, why do you want this? Or what specifically is interesting about the colligative property, so I can search for something very specific. And then when I can be very specific, I can answer the question better. So all these things are life skills that are part of skills that are very good. Like, oh man, kids are so fast at doing certain things. They're so excellent at doing certain things. It's difficult when you're a teacher because the learning process is gone. There's no like, this is a life skill. How do people learn now? They learn by getting advice. They don't learn by making mistakes. They don't learn by critical thinking. I mean, they do sometimes. You do still go through these. It's just less. They're less reliant on making mistakes, critical thinking, problem solving. These things you don't need to do these things. Really, like in reality, if tools get better, completely better and better, you will need these skills less. You don't need to solve problems or critical thinking. You just get advice. Advice removes the need to critically think or problem solve. You don't have problems if someone has already solved those problems. So when you're learning Japanese, if you're getting advice on Japanese, you're going to assume, sort of, that you have no problems. There will be no problems that are unique to you. There are no problems that you have to solve or figure out, because everyone else, there's got to be someone out there that has the same problem as you that can offer you advice. And that's where it goes all the way back to Babin's talk. Babin's wonderful. I really appreciate these candid comments, because these candid comments are very helpful. It's illustrating a point that I want others to not have this problem in the future. I hope when you guys become 30, 40, 50, all the way to your old age, you no longer find it surprising that people are very incompetent now. And it's not because they're stupid or unable to learn. Is their foundational skills are low now. Their foundational skills need practice. Like, you don't need to do these foundational skills anymore. Tools, like electronic tools, are so good. And that's the detriment. It's a trade-off of having fantastic tools. If you're ever wondering if you have social anxiety right now, of talking to people in person, what are you not doing when you're online? Well, you're not in person. So obviously, like, it's not like you're incapable of talking to people in person. Is if awesome tools are alleviating this and you keep doing it, hopefully everyone keeps communicating this way. But every time when you think about doing this skill, you're hoping, what you're thinking in the back is you're hoping everyone just adopts this tool so that you don't need this skill anymore. So that's kind of the thing. And that's why when I play video games and stuff, it's kind of my way to talk to people who are reliant on very specific tools to make them feel happy, make them feel competent, and then slowly take them out of their comfort zone. And unfortunately, yesterday, I obviously took someone out of their comfort zone way too much to draw criticism, right? And that's fine. I mean, that person will go on and do their own thing with the tools that they have. So if they really want to talk to someone like me, it's going to be quite difficult because I don't really focus on the same thing, right? I'm not focusing on getting OPOP in Japanese. I'm using it as a platform to illustrate that it's okay not to be the best. It's okay not to be N1 in 30 days. Like this is like my advice videos on how to get N1 in 30 days. This is advice. Ask yourself who is giving the advice. It's not malicious. It's a psychological position that they are in. They are N1 already, and they're trying to help you the best way they can without process. Okay? So these guys are great. They're experts. They're really good. You're really competent too. The idea is, where is N3, Babin, and where is N5? And that can, it's not just a negative thing or a positive thing. You can feel really good knowing that you finally reach N3. That's a lot of hard work. Navigating that, you have to ask yourself how you got there, because it can be very informative. So going to the punchline now. So we have teachers, especially this specific teacher, who talked about the age range of 15 to 18, so high school. I focus on, I've said this a bunch of times, I focus on 18, specifically 18 to 25, so college level, right? Post-college level. 15 to 18, as you go earlier, whatever 15 to 18 problems are, they get amplified when they're 18 to 25. During this time, I did some outreach to high schools, and the feeling of being a teacher in this day and age, which was 10 years ago really, but now I can only feel like it's worse, is that there's such a huge gap in life skills that it feels hopeless. And the last thing a teacher wants to feel is hopeless for their kids. So what do? They leave in droves. So if you're ever wondering, if you go to school and you find some teacher that just has no idea what they're doing anymore, is because they don't. It's like, how do you solve kids who are afraid to make mistakes? Solve problems on their own. Have foundational logic without needing advice. As these people grow older, they become more and more dependent on a source of advice to help them feel better about themselves, right? To help them feel competent. How do you feel competent about your skills? You look at everyone else. Well, to me, what I do as a teacher, generally speaking, I have to look back. Like, N3 is awesome. When someone tells me they're barely N3, I want them to tell me what this means. What does it mean? What does it mean to be an N3? And if they can describe to me all the things that they know as an N3, it helps the person and the student or whatever, like I could know zero Japanese, but if I can get that person to describe to me what they know with an N3 in Japanese, I like to believe that it will allow them to see what they know and how they know it. It reminds them of their journey and their process of getting there. And that's usually what teachers do. Teachers have to focus on the process. Well, if you have kids that has such a gigantic gap, how do you do that? How do you cross that? Basically now high school teachers are struggling. They're not teaching anything. They're not teaching the skill anymore. They're teaching life skills again. Because without these life skills, you can't teach the actual skill, right? They're not actually teaching the skill anymore. You have to give the learning. So even if the goal is to become N1, if they don't have the learning skills to do so, it could be N5 for all I care. It would be very, very difficult. And that's why it's not surprising. It's not surprising to me that people quit below N5. So that's kind of the sad part. I know this sounds really sad. I'm sorry. It kind of sounds a little bit morbid or hopeless. But generally speaking, thinking about these things makes all the people who are already competent grateful, and those people are the ones that I'm trying to enable and inspire to come up with new ways to get other people to want to do the thing they're doing. That's kind of where YouTube started and Twitch started. Somewhere along the line, algorithm and machines have skipped over that now. So now it's about what's the best way to do something, what's the example of the best way, what does fluent Japanese look like? Well, I'm going to tell you that all respects to those people who are fluent in Japanese at the highest level, that's not fluent to me. Fluent is someone who's freely learning Japanese without effort. Like, if you're learning Japanese, you're loving it, you're constantly progressing forward, that is fluency, in my opinion. Because you will eventually get there, to any extent of yourself. I know that is diminishing those who pass way past N1, but to me, it's a necessary switch of perspective in order to encourage all the people you're leaving behind. So all those experts, all those fluent people, good for them. They're so good at what they're doing. They're just so terrible at teaching people, in my opinion. You trade off being able to teach people by being very good at your thing. Those people can choose to sacrifice some of their time at being the best to teach or coach. That's perfectly up to them. They're not obligated to do so. My goal in life is to make teaching seem rewarding and fun, and like practicing it doesn't often seem like fun, because how do you practice teaching? You do things like this. I'm deliberately spending more time on Romaji to Kana and back, because I need to figure out, how do I bridge this gap to be a more effective teacher? I mean, this is a very specific example just for Japanese. And that's even worse, because now I'm only limiting myself to Japanese. So I need to figure out how the techniques that I learned from Romaji to Kana and back, how do I apply this to other languages? right? Because it's not just Japanese. If you limit yourself to Japanese, then this is context specific. That's not learning how to teach. That's learning how to learn. That's just learning Japanese. So when someone offers advice by dropping romaji, they're thinking about all the things that make romaji bad. They're not talking about how relying on one thing without associating it with another thing is what's causing the problem. The idea is people are learning romaji without associating to kana actively. So when they remove the romaji, there's no association to kana. So they'll struggle to drop romaji. I don't see that in myself because I didn't do that. Not only that, today is the day. So this is like the punchline to today. I'm removing romaji today. If it hits a fan, like if I hit a wall, I'll put romaji back and try to come up with a different strategy to offset this. That is solving problems. It's doing and then solving problems. If you're constantly getting advice on what's the best way, you are not solving problems. You are getting advice from someone who have already attempted to solve those problems because they made it. There's a reward for struggle. It's not what you think. It's not that I made it reward, like that delayed gratification. I made it, like haha, I made it, right? That's a haha joke, by the way, guys. Haha, I made it. No, the reward, in my opinion, is you get to learn how to solve problems for yourself. And to me, this is priceless. This is a life skill. So to heck with feeling incompetent, or if you trip, you fall, you get up, you're practicing a priceless life skill. Every once in a while, I'm not saying do it all the time because this stuff kicks your butt. It makes you feel bad. It kicks your butt. You're always feeling like you're incompetent, you're not very impressive. Yeah, it does kick your butt. But every once in a while, you know, do something, in my opinion, do something without relying on advice. Because one day, when you grow older, yeah, you're going to have so much experience that phrase, it depends, which comes up a lot as a youth, because oftentimes it depends means it's advice based. That means you read so much, it depends. One day that XP will be it depends, but it doesn't matter anymore. Do you know why it doesn't matter? Because you can solve your own problems. You never feel like it depends if you're always going to feel confident enough to solve your own problems. This is where I am at the age of 36. So when someone offers me advice, that's cool. I'll take it into consideration. When the advice is, you're doing it wrong. That's okay. I'm doing it my way. If you're right in the end, awesome. I've learned something about how wrong my way is. If you're wrong, honestly, I don't really learn much, right? Like when someone once challenged me and said that I'm always concerned about being right. It's like, no, I want to rephrase that. I'm always concerned about not being wrong. because being right means I don't learn anything. So I love getting advice, but it doesn't stop me from doing it my way. I don't adopt people's advice. I keep their advice to heart and see if my way falls out or in line with their advice. When you're younger, you don't get this luxury yet, but as you grow older, you will get this luxury. And my goal in the future is that when teachers teach young kids, they're gonna become adults one day. And I'm hoping that those adults find ways to, for example, solve their depression. Solve their boredom. Solve their lack of motivation, which is different from boredom. One can be bored and still be motivated to do something. So all these things, the older you get, the more it's going to be it depends. And the more you say it depends, the harder the barrier is to eventually be able to solve it. So hopefully that's not the case. I don't want it's already happening now. Like I usually talk to people around the age of 18, and this whole it depends thing, it means Google it, because Google has a lot of information, so it depends. Well, I'm not asking if it depends on Google and all the information. I'm asking you to form an opinion that can be relatable. That's different from giving advice that is not relatable. You can be the best Japanese speaker in the world and give unrelatable advice. And that's a vicious cycle, because if these are the people who are giving unrelatable advice to young kids, what do the kids do in return? Well, if they ever reach this, they're going to continue giving advice in an unrelatable way to the next generation, and it keeps going back. This is the vicious cycle. That's kind of a morbid standpoint, but I honestly believe when there are enough deficiencies in teaching, it will raise awareness enough that maybe we'll design tools, ironically, for focusing on teaching to go back to raising awareness. Maybe one day. Just teaching is not the same anymore. When I hear and read or see classrooms and seminars, they're not the same as before anymore. They're trying to solve this gap of using tools for the kids. So now syllabus, right? I've always so syllabus, people who go to school probably remember, on the day one you get like an outline of all the courses, all the stuff, just like what Duolingo does, right? When you click on learn, there's like this roadmap and stuff. It lines the things. I would say now almost over 50% of these syllabus is about life skills. It's not even about the content that they're trying to teach. Half the page, when I saw a syllabus recently from a few people who are going to college for the first time, or like second, when I look at the syllabus, half of it are instructions that weren't there before. And when I went to college, all it is 90% of, hey, this is what we're going to learn. Like, this is all the stuff. You have no idea what even the words are. Like, when you're looking at the syllabus, it's like, you know, colligative property of water. Like, what the heck does colligative mean? Like, over 90% of the actual text is like, these are English words, but I have no idea what they mean at all, right? What does that sound like, going into kana without any reference? So that used to be the syllabus. Nowadays, though, at least 50% of it is like, okay, so before we learn about chemistry, let's start with spending 1 week learning how to add and subtract numbers. Because early chemistry, you learn about like covalent bonds and ionic compounds, and those things require being able to add and subtract negative numbers. I literally did this before too. Even during my age, when I was in college, when I had office hours to like tutor people, right? Or help people, the first 30 minutes involves foundation. Like, it's not that they didn't comprehend they could comprehend complex topics. Just like, I don't know, how a organic compound, right? How an organic compound reacts with an ionic one, for example, right? However, when you try to get them to do other functions that require just adding like, for example, adding 1 plus -1, right? Then it becomes an ordeal, and it spends 30 minutes. And how long was my office hours? An hour. It was 60 minutes. So it took 50% of the session not reviewing any of the content that they're responsible for on an exam. That's kind of the dire straits. But I don't believe this is going to be the case in the future. I actually think with all these posts, all these awareness, all these tools, humans are going to solve that, in my opinion. So just keep an open mind. And let me read these messages. I'm sorry. When I go into these things in the beginning, I just keep going.